So a couple of months ago, Air India 171 captured the headlines, and we've gotten so many questions and comments from you regarding mental and emotional health of pilots. And we here at the Captain Steve channel want to open up a conversation in this space in social media about emotional and mental health of pilots. And so we're just going to take your questions today on this kind of special episode of Ask the Captain. So let's jump into question number one. All right, Vickers Dorter says this, with so much automation, what are the biggest stressors for pilots in the cockpit today? What are the hidden pressures of the job that passengers never see? Automation in some ways has made the job easier. It's taken a little bit of less of the fatigue from pilots, but at the same time, there's more things to learn, more systems to comprehend, more check rides that you have to pass. All of that stuff is stress and pressure. You also have the monumental trust and responsibility that goes with hundreds of lives in the back of your airplane, flying across open oceans for hours at a time with pilots that you might have only met that day. Many times crews are paired up for the first time they're going to fly together. The training is wonderful, but you're getting to know other people. And with that being said, there are stresses out there on us. But in my experience, the bigger stresses are the interpersonal relationships, not so much with coworkers, but with family members or with people that are close to us. That's the stuff that really, makes us dark inside or makes our hearts hurt sometimes. When we talk to audiences, my wife and I have a course on parenting called the 9 Practices of the Proactive Parent. And in that course, we talk to parents directly about things that cause emotional stress in the home. And number one at the top of the list is a teenager especially, that's in some form of rebellion. Oh boy, that's so hard on a parent because there's just no relief from it at all. And that parent's heart breaks all the time. Same is true here. The stuff goes on at home. It's just really hard to compartmentalize it and keep it there. But if you're bringing it to work with you consistently, you got to let somebody know. All right, we've got Jeremy of Finerty 4015. If you, Captain Steve, sat in the seat and realized your partner was a little mentally off, what is the process to remove that pilot? Would there be pressure to fly anyways to stay on schedule? Well, there's always all sorts of pressures that come to bear on pilots, right? Maybe the most are internal. Maybe you just want to get home. And we call that get-home-itis. And that's real insidious. When you're like on the last leg and you want to get home, do you turn, cut corners to make sure that you get home? I would be lying to you if I said there weren't pilots who did that. That's just one of those things that we kind of talk about in training so that we have an open conversation about it. Now, you asked, what if I think one of my pilots is off? As a trained counselor, I'm going to dig a little deeper now. I'm going to say, hey, is everything okay? You seem distant today. You seem off. Is there something on your mind? I'm going to keep digging. And if that person is still off-putting and they seem dark and they're not making eye contact and, they're kind of maybe angry under the surface, I'm going to dig a little deeper. Ultimately, as a captain, I've got the call on whether we go flying or not. Now, what if I was a first officer? Could I do that same thing with the captain? Yeah, you can. Most airlines will back you up. Now, you might get a little pushback on it. But if you pick up that phone and you make a call to your boss, your chief pilot, and say, hey, look, I got a problem here. There's always a pilot on duty at our headquarters 24/7. And if you call that person and say, I'm not comfortable with this flight, I want off of it, I'll take the heat for this, but there's something off with the captain, you most likely will get backed up on that. But you better have your ducks in a row as well. You understand how that works, right? But if you're that serious about it, you know what? Make the call. All right. And do it. And they're going to back you up. My airline has a whole program designed for people to get help with emotional and mental issues in their life. And it's a no jeopardy thing to make that phone call. I think we're probably the leaders in the industry on that. And it's a very well advertised program. Every pilot knows about it. And the hotline to that service gets 4 to 5 calls a day. Isn't that great? All right. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. All right, we've got Lorenz Zolesi, 120. I can relate to being unfit for duty and being afraid to say something. I broke down and asked for a leave of absence before I made a mistake and killed somebody. I wish there had been someone at work to help me as you helped him. And I'm so sorry to hear that, first of all. And not every corporation is the same. I know that the 4 major airlines in the U.S. all have thriving programs where the pilots can reach out with no jeopardy, no questions asked, to get somebody to talk to and get the help that they need. Now, where it goes from there, well, it depends on a case-by-case basis. I'm sorry you didn't get help, and sadly, your story is repeated too many times. We need to change the culture here at the FAA. You guys are listening at the FAA. We need to change the culture about this. There need to be government programs that are funded to go and allow pilots to get the help that they need without fear or recrimination about losing their job. All right, so we got Chaplain Legit on, and he says, as a pilot and counselor, can you talk about the importance of checking in with your colleagues and creating an environment where it's safe to admit you're not okay? Well, I think that has to do with your demeanor and how open people feel with you. If they feel like you're the kind of person that they can talk to, then they are going to open up with you. You can help them by asking them good questions like, how are you doing today? And maybe sharing a little bit about you. You know, you tend to want to open up with people that you feel are truly humble and people that are truly transparent and honest. You feel like being more humble and honest and transparent with them. So, if you're always sarcastic and always have to be on and always have the last word and make a joke out of everything, people probably are not going to let down their defenses with you and let you in, no matter how much you ask. So I think setting the pace and the tempo for that, as a counselor myself, I always want to have people feel comfortable with me, basically so they feel like they can share many times their deepest secrets with me. That's a really good question. All right, Dominic Hamill writes this. We all tend to shoulder the pain of a difficult situation or something we're going through without a word. Thank you for urging fellow pilots to ask that very simple yet most important question of their fellow crew members. When I went out on the first video and several videos afterwards, just saying, hey, next time you go flying, ask your fellow pilots, hi, how you doing today? Just a simple question. Everything okay at home? And if you get that surfacey answer, like fine, dig a little deeper. Just say, everything good. You ready to fly today? Yeah, that's a good question too. And if everybody goes, yep, I'm ready to fly. Everything's good. Great. Then you're ready to fly. If somebody says, hey, you know what? Are you serious about that? Because I'd really like to have somebody to talk to. All of a sudden you've made a breakthrough and you can have a conversation about how that person is doing. Then you can make the evaluation whether you think they're ready to fly today or not. So thank you for the encouragement on this. I do think it's an important question that we all ought to be asking each other, not just in lieu of a bad, tragic accident, but we ought to do it all the time. I've been doing it for 34 years. So I'm going to encourage my fellow pilots to do the same. Since IAW 1763, is there anything positive to come from this terrible disaster? I hope we, as people, realize we are all human and that mental health is as important as physical health. I hope we can all be more compassionate. Yeah, that's a fact. There's not a lot of compassionate going around these days, and there's not a lot of nice going around either. People are not kind, it seems, with each other, and we need large doses of all of those things. And yeah, we ought to take mental health just as seriously as physical health. I get physicals all the time, but I got to make sure I'm mentally sharp to go to work as well. And that means balancing stuff that's going on at home with my traveling life and my professional life. But the bottom line on that is I am the person who knows and has to be responsible for that. It's helpful when you have somebody else that you feel like you can connect with, or that somebody else has got your back, especially your company. I think we're going to get some questions here in a minute about corporations and how they handle these things. And we'll talk about how the culture is changing, but good question. Jeff Jones, 6951. As a pilot, what is your personal pre-flight human checklist, in quotes? How do you make sure your co-pilot is truly ready for a flight ahead? Well, I ask that question almost every flight. Hey, how you doing? Or some variation of it. And one of the things that happens at my airline, we get trained actually in this, is to talk about being in the green, as we call it. So there's green, yellow, and red, just like a traffic light. Red means stop. We need to kind of stop what's going on right here. I need to get caught up with the situation. Yellow means I'm really kind of starting falling behind and I'm feeling a little rushed here. And you can use that language to say to a fellow aviator, hey, I'm in the red here. And we've been trained to do that. And I've said a couple times to co-pilots and to captains when I was over there, hey, I'm totally in the red right now. And it's a kind of a humorous way to say it, but they'll smile and go, okay, well, tell me why you're in the red. And I go, you've barked about 4 things at me. I've got other things I got to do here. Can we just stop the airplane for a minute until I get caught up? Sure. Absolutely. Thanks for letting me know. And we handle it. I get caught up and off we go again. I always ask my co-pilots before we take the runway, as we're taxiing down, I look at them and I go, guys, you guys or gals both in the green? And I get a thumbs up from them and I go, okay, are you lying to me? I follow up with a question. And then they look at me and they go, nope, I'm in the green. I go, okay, great. I'm just giving them a second opportunity to go, well, I told you I was in the green, but I'm not really. I've never had anybody take me up on that, but I'm hoping if they need to someday, they will. So far, lots of thumbs up on that, but it's a good question. All right, we've got Kathy, 93-551. After an incident like this, does it cause you to look at the familiar controls in your own cockpit differently? And how do you process that? Not really. I mean, when we're talking so much about the fuel control switches, have I done a lot of study recently about the fuel control switches? Much more than I probably would have ever done otherwise. But it doesn't make me view anything any differently. I don't think I'm on edge thinking that a co-pilot's going to grab the fuel control switches. I think in the big scheme of things, this was such a rare occurrence and there were so many potentially extenuating circumstances to this. It is going to cause me to ask deeper questions before we ever even get into the airplane. And I think those questions are always timely. Okay. SI and a bunch of letters and numbers. All right. I can't imagine being in a situation where another crew member endangered the plane. This is not an event that would be trained for in the simulator. That is correct. It was never suspected another pilot would have the intent to crash. There have been several incidents over the last, 40 or 50 years. Germanwings is probably the most notable one, where the co-pilot had actually rehearsed what he was going to do on a previous flight, I think at home in a simulator, and then executed it on the flight that crashed. The conclusion on that was that it was purely intentional. The jury's still out about Air India 171. My contention is either way, whether it was intentional or not intentional, it was still pilot error, because there's no circumstance where right after rotate, you're going to turn both fuel control switches to cut off and leave them there for 10 seconds before you turn them back on. Just there's no procedure for that. And we saw the why. There is no procedure for that. Byron Marshall, 3924 says, I know the airline pilots are required to have regular physical examinations. Are psychological evaluations also included? Not currently, not a formal psychological evaluation. Do I wish they were? I don't know. The answer to that is kind of nuanced in the sense that if you knew you were always going to get a psychological evaluation, would you kind of prepare for that, or would you know the answers to give to not seem like something was off? I think most people would kind of do that, sadly. The psychological evaluation goes on mostly with your coworkers. And, somebody just seems off today. Having the courage to ask them a little deeper question and follow up with a question after that, I think is the thing that's going to help us to get to this. But am I opposed to it? I'd have to see the parameters on how they put together a psychological evaluation. I'm not sure I'm a big fan at this point with that being a formal thing. I'd rather have it be much more of an informal thing, if you know what I mean. But yeah, that's a great question. I'm open to it. On some level. All right, I got Sam with letters and numbers. He says this: when I was active private pilot, I disclosed to the FAA during my annual physical that I was seeing a psychiatrist. My license was immediately revoked. Most pilots I know said that they would never share that info with the FAA. Sadly, Sam, your story is repeated way too many times, and that's why the culture around emotional and mental health needs to change, and it needs to change quickly. My good friend, Dr. Charlie Carreri, has been doing great work for the last couple of decades on this. We had an interview with him recently. Check that out on our channel. Really, really insightful guy. He has helped Southwest, United. He got the program started at American Airlines. It's called Project Wingman. It's probably the gold standard in the industry. Charlie was behind that. And I'm so sad that happened too, because that's what keeps people from self-reporting. And it shouldn't be that way. There should be a way for you to self-report, get the help, and not lose your job. I'm sorry to hear that. All right, let me see. Let's go to Shannon Nussbaum, 3279. It seems so insane to me that major airlines wouldn't push mental health help after the Germanwings accident. You're not wrong about that. Do you have any idea why they didn't have more of a reaction? I don't think that they didn't have more of a reaction. I know that my airline in particular really ramped up their program. They every time you go down to training, every 9 months, they have a special session just to talk about this and mental health and give you the 800 number to call. They highly encourage you to do that. They give you a refrigerator magnet, which is, how I get everything else in my life off the refrigerator. But I've probably got 20 of these magnets that were handed to me over the years. Talking to Dr. Carreri, which I just mentioned, he said 25,000 of those magnets have been handed out over the years that they've had the program going. And the program has been going for probably about a dozen years or so. That's a lot of magnets. That's at least one per pilot at my airline. And that's a good thing indeed. All right, let's see. Last question. Vedic Life Coach, thank you for your leadership in breaking down the stigma. It will be strong in this industry because pilots could be prohibited from flying. It's time the whole industry evolves. That's more of a statement than a question, but I couldn't agree with you more. It is time that the whole industry evolves. There are multiple cultures around the world that are different and hard to break into. At least here in American culture, where I fly as a United States citizen, I think there's been some major inroads to this. Could we make more progress? Absolutely. I'm pointing a finger at the FAA right now and saying, FAA, you need to up your game in this area. You need to get rid of the stigma, and Congress needs to pass some sort of meaningful support, financial support for pilots that need to step back for a little bit. The general public needs you to do that. It would be nice if you needed to get help and you could go and get a paycheck for the next 6 months while you sought the help that you needed. Wouldn't that be refreshing? All right, Congress. Let's see something. All right, FAA, let's get on it. Well, great questions this time around, folks. I know this is a serious topic, but I hope it's been meaningful to you. It's been refreshing, on some level reassuring. And I'm going to encourage my fellow pilots to be looking out after your other co-pilots and your other captains that you fly with. Make sure they're doing okay. Ask those questions and then enjoy your next layover. All right. Well, these are great questions. Thanks so much. This has been Ask the Captain. I'm Captain Steve. We'll see you next time.